Hey, deserving listeners, tell all, let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. This is the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel. If you ever want to interact with us or interact with the community, the best place is on Patreon. That's where it's easier for me to comment and reply to people, to DMs and comments and whatnot. Only if you want to, and let's watch the show.
Yeah, you guys don't give up. So Liz and I, broke up with Liz again. Just things weren't going well. We were in counseling and I didn't see things changing. So I asked her to move out.
All right. So as a citizen, how do I feel? I would say that maybe it's for the best for both of them. As a therapist, of course, I don't have any vested interest in the two of them staying together or not. But as a citizen, I don't know. Even as a citizen, I would say that it might be a better idea if their therapy had helped more, or if he recognized that he had a problem. Well, here's what I'll say, is that it sounds like Ed broke up with her again for a very similar reason, if that's the same reasons as before. That from the show, I can't tell, obviously, but from the edit, it looks like he becomes distorted regarding jealousy. He feels worried that she's going to abandon him, that she's going to cheat on him. Then he goes to a place where he is convinced, or he has a feeling of fear, and then he converts that into hostility and a kind of arrogant talking down to mansplaininess that just badgers her from all different directions. We saw that earlier in the season. He has a really hard time recognizing that he's the one creating the whole problem, or at least most of the problem. And he has this perspective of just like, well, there's something wrong with her. She's immature, or she's stupid, or whatever it is, that the narrative that he has in his head, instead of recognizing that he has a normal need for security. And because of his history, for whatever reason, he is overly sensitive to cues or indications of abandonment, and becomes convinced of that. And then his way of coping with it is to become emotionally arrogant and to insult and to push her away. And then eventually he will break up with her as a way of trying to punish her, or maybe as a way of trying to regulate his emotions. It's possible that there's a part of him that's just like, this isn't working. I don't know. This feels really bad. Maybe if we just ended the relationship, I won't feel bad anymore. And yeah, it will end that, but it doesn't end his need for attachment, right? That's the way it looked to me. And they were in couple therapy, and it sounds like they went to more than one session. Thank goodness, because that almost never happens on the show. But in that session, I didn't see a lot of indication. And of course, we only saw, a few minutes of it. But there didn't seem to be a lot of indication that Ed was understanding what his issue was. I mean, he tended to frame, I can't remember how he was framing it, but the therapist was trying to help him to look at himself, and he looked at himself kind of, but not entirely. So it sounds like it's happening again. And then from Liz's side, I think she legitimately has feelings for Ed, as he does for her, but due to her issues, she, frames this relationship as the best relationship she's ever been in. I think she said that before, because her past relationships were I think she even said, but we could take a guess and say that they were highly problematic, her previous relationships. And then going back when she was younger, there could also be a lot of issues there. And so by comparison, her relationship with Ed might be wonderful, right? So she doesn't know what a healthy relationship might even look like, or she doesn't know that she deserves one, or something like that. I think she also potentially has some unhealed trauma, which would make sense given how young she is and how much trauma I think she's been through, that she projective identification-wise will recreate in her relationship with Ed. Listen to my episodes on projective identification. In a nutshell, we tend to recreate our past relationships, even if they are unhealthy, particularly if we haven't healed from them or we're not aware of it. If we were abused in the past, we will subconsciously, the idea goes, the model is, that we will find someone that will be like our past, either the other person or ourselves. So we might find someone that resembles our abusive parent, or we might find someone that resembles ourselves when we were being abused, and then we take on the abusive other, the abusive parent, for example. And then we abuse our partner, and we make our partner feel like the way we felt when we were children. And all the while we feel like everything's fine because of the mechanisms of projective identification and internalization and all that, repetition compulsion. Anyway, so she seems to be potentially still in the throes of that pattern. Maybe things are getting a little better. She's in therapy more. Ed perhaps isn't as abusive as previous partners. So maybe she's on the road to wellness. Maybe even the two of them are, but I don't know. Hearing about this is pretty disheartening because in the beginning, I was kind of confused by Ed, honestly, with Rose. And then as we started to see more behavior with Liz, I started to say, oh. And then I thought, well, this isn't going to go well. Then they broke up, and I thought, okay, well, doesn't really matter. Then they got back together, and I thought, okay, maybe they're working things out. And then they had the big fight earlier in this season. And I thought, oh boy, this is pretty bad. He's been through a lot of therapy on this point, and if he's still acting this way and who knows what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe he does recognize his part in it, but he certainly doesn't exhibit it in terms of what they show us. And then they got back together, they made up, and they were in couples therapy. So I was like, oh, actually, wow. And there was some evidence that Ed could take responsibility, could look at himself and try to grow and heal. And so I did have some optimism. But hearing about this, it doesn't look good. Because if you're with them or you're Liz, for example, then why would you want to get back together? But the thing is normally I'd be thinking they're done with other couples, or maybe even them in the past. But they have a pattern. So I would put money on them getting back together again. I think that's just almost automatically going to happen, right? I would say that hopefully they continue to go. Now, I will tell you that I've worked with couples who have had this pattern, and if they give it enough time and effort, they can change over time. In the first couple of years, is a lot of change going to happen? No, it'll take them a lot longer than that. There's hope if they continue to go to therapy, if the therapeutic relationship is helpful enough, and particularly if Ed is able to finally kind of look at himself and say, wow, I am way sensitive. I think he knows that a little bit. I think he knows he's a little sensitive, a little insecure, but I think he very quickly jumps in with an arrogant point of view that it's the other person's fault. And, it's if Liz were more mature or more smart or something, or understood her place or whatever. He wouldn't word it that way, of course, but I think in his mind, he would wish that Liz just stayed home and did nothing and was just there for him. And that would make him be less worried about infidelity and being abandoned. So I think he very quickly goes there. I think there are times when he's able to, at least what's on the show, where he can say, yeah, I think I might be a little too sensitive to things, but it doesn't go all the way. But that's expected. It takes a while for one to fully accept things and grow in therapy. So I would say, yeah, if there's any way for the two of them, regardless of what relationship they're in, honestly, is if they really work in a helpful therapeutic relationship, individual or couple.
To give our relationship a chance, that we need to be separated. And I told her this time was different. I'm like, look, I love you. I want to work this out, but we can't do that living together. I wanted to live in my house by myself with my dogs. I just needed time to gain perspective on what I want in life.
The other possibility, and of course I can't know, but we've seen things along these lines before, is that he's using the breakup as either a conscious or a subconscious manipulative tool. He seems to use that language. I didn't show it, but in the previous week's episode, he was saying, I'm not ready to get married to you. And he seemed to be really pointed about it. And she actually had a pretty hurt reaction from that, even though I think he was saying it in a way that wasn't super hurtful. I think he was just saying, I think we have a lot of conflict and I'm not sure if getting married is the right thing. But I think there was also a tinge of him using it as a criticism. The read between the lines is, I'm critical of you. I don't know if I want to marry you, because of how you are. And then she was really hurt by that, which anyone would be if your fiancé said that about you, right? So there's a possibility that this, along with other times, because I think this might be the 10, 11, 12th time that he's broken up with her, that he doesn't actually intend on not being with her, but is trying to send a message. And people will do that. They'll resort to that of just like, look, I'm going to break up with you because of this, this, and this. But in the back of their mind, they're hoping that they get back together, and they're hoping that the breakup will shape the other person's behavior, which is, pretty awful.
I got dumped by Ed again. Ed pretty much told me I had less than a week to find a place to live.
Yeah, that's pretty awful to just kick someone out, give them a week. Well, who knows what was really happened? She said he pretty much just gave me a week. Does that mean that he wanted her to move out in a week, but was willing to give it some more time? We could imagine it going differently. So, yikes.
I don't know how many times Ed's broken up with me. We're at like 9 or 10 right now. After a month and a half of couch surfing, I finally found a great apartment. I just feel really comfortable here. Hey.
Hi. Oh my God, how are you?
Okay, so couch surfing. It's pretty awful to think about. I mean, maybe it's for the best for the two of them not to live together during that time, but certainly he could have maybe couch surfed, right? Why would she have to move out? And she has a kid too, so yikes, right? She has a kid. And I think it's great that they don't show her on the show, but she has a kid. Now, maybe the kid stayed with the father, I don't know, or another family member, but my goodness.
I think I'm still mad at Ed.
What are you most angry about?
I'm very angry at Ed, but I'm kind of like angry with myself because I kind of knew subconsciously that I knew I'd kind of have to do it on my own again, but I didn't exactly prepare for it.
Yeah. I feel like you definitely are going to have your walls up for a while.
A friend of mine, Paulette Perthatch, became somewhat famous for this term about 5 or 6 years ago. She published an article called the FU Fund. FU Fund? F-Off Fund? Something like that? F-Off Fund, probably. Anyway, I had her on the podcast. She used to be a co-host like Umberto for a bit of time. This article based on this idea that everyone, and maybe women in particular, need to have a stash of money so that they can walk away from a relationship financially and be financially okay. Because so many people, and more often it's women, will be financially dependent on their partner, on their heterosexual partner. And that means that they have to put up with relationships for much longer, maybe even in perpetuity, particularly if they're being abused economically and otherwise. If they don't have money, because a lot of men, due to their privilege and other things, that they have enough money where if they wanted to move out, or it's often their place because their home or their what is considered to be their home. Of course, it is both people's home, but it was the woman that moved in with the man, and so they will have a greater power, and thus if the man wants to leave, it's a lot easier. So there's this idea of propagating a culture and a notion. It sounds unromantic, right? That even if you're in love and you want to be with someone, that you would start squirreling away an F-off fund or an FU fund, F-off fund? Probably F-off, right? But, you just never know what's going to happen. And what if? And you just want to be able to have the power to be able to do so. Now, some people don't have that privilege. I mean, a lot of people, regardless of gender or situation, can't manage to save any money because they're being exploited by the capitalistic, materialistic system. So there's that. But if you can, and it just means saving a little bit and sacrificing a little bit of current expenditure so you can squirrel away 2 to 3 months of rent or some amount of money so that you could actually move out at any time and find a place, then it's just something to think about, particularly if you're in a relationship like theirs, where I think anyone could have told Liz, look, maybe things will work out, but there's also a chance that he'll kick you out and you'll have nowhere to go. If you can, hopefully, maybe squirrel away some money so that if you needed to go, you could without having to worry financially, particularly since you have a kid. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about empowerment. When we feel empowered, we recognize our strengths. When we feel empowered and we experience adversity, we're more likely to see it as a welcome challenge rather than an overwhelming obstacle. And since we're social creatures, we often need help from others to feel empowered at times. We might need others to give us perspective. We might need others to recognize how we might be able to overcome the obstacle. And sometimes the people around us, they're really not that much help. I've been there before. When I went to therapy for the first time when I was 19 years old, it was primarily because none of my friends were very helpful in this area. Sometimes it's really great to talk with a therapist when you want to feel more empowered. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is convenient and flexible and affordable. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Yeah, I do. I do miss him. But we've been seeing each other.
What?
Yeah, I suspected as much, or I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me that they're not really broken up. And these are the friends that if you have a friend like this, they can really be frustrating. That you finally hear, oh, okay, you broke up. One, I'm happy for you that you don't have to deal with that person anymore. And two, I'm happy for us because I don't want to talk about this guy anymore. That's all we're talking about is this. And it's frustrating to me. And okay, you're finally broken up. Okay. And then they get back together and you feel like you're being pulled this way and that. And this is why you want to be differentiated in situations like that. It's like, not my problem, her problem. And I care about her and I'm with her. But if I take this on, it's just going to ruin me. There are times, so differentiation is the ability to make a choice, a healthy choice about when to merge and when not to merge. When you're with a friend who, for example, is wanting comfort around their relationship, and by merging, like if my friend Bob comes to me and is talking about his marriage and I merge with him emotionally and am very open and very involved, so to speak, and I start to have my own feelings wrapped up in his relationship with his wife, then that usually goes okay because I've determined, I guess, that to do so doesn't ruin my day. It is, Bob doesn't foist too much responsibility on me. He is pretty self-reflective, very self-reflective himself, so I feel like I don't have to do a lot of work there. And so I can just sort of hand myself over emotionally, and I don't have to have an internal boundary with that. Whereas if I were Liz's friend, I would, because if I melded with that and started to get invested personally in her relationship with Ed, I would be thrown around and, this way and that emotionally, and my expectations and my own frustration level would, go up and down. And so I would have to differentiate from that and say, like, okay, for me to meld with this, for me to join and really be overlapping with my friend in this situation emotionally, it's just going to destroy me. I can't do that. So I'll listen and I'll be there, but I'm not gonna get my hopes up. I'm not going to get too involved. I'm not going to take on any kind of responsibility. I will take responsibility for being a good friend. I'll listen, but I'm not going to try to help because why? Like when Bob comes to me, I might try to help. I might actually say, hey, what if you tried this? What if you tried that? Or whatever. Or, all sorts of involvement of myself and my own ego involved. But with Liz, if you did that, it would really bring you down. So it's a matter of choice. A lot of people will just say blanket, you have to draw boundaries, but it's more about gauging the situation. Because if we drew boundaries with everyone, we'd be alone. In fact, I would venture to say our obsession with advising people about always having good boundaries is a contributor to the amount of pain and loneliness that everyone is going through. By the way, she has a semicolon tattoo, which indicates, I don't know what it indicates to her, but it's a Me Too movement, so to speak, and also a recognition, raising awareness of mental health issues, depression, that kind of stuff, trauma. So she has that. Makes sense given her history.
It just feels different. It really does. I mean, she has her own place. I have my own place. She comes over. Right now, we're just having a lot of fun, just kind of exploring each other again.
Okay, well, maybe that's a good configuration, that they don't live together and they can just kind of be in the dating zone. That might actually help them to be more stable and more differentiated. But I think if things go according to the pattern, that eventually they'll move in together at his prompting. He often is the one pushing for it because I think he has a lot of need there and a lot of worries about abandonment and won't want to risk her living at another place. We don't know that for sure, but if I were to put my money down on something, I would say that this is just another cycle in their pattern.
To be honest, I'm a little bit nervous to see Liz at the tell-all. Come here, baby. I'm hoping it goes well. I don't want to piss her off. I've learned something after every single breakup, but I really feel this time that if I break Liz's heart one more time, it's going to be the end.
I mean, he said that before. He says that he's learned something after every breakup. Maybe. I'll take his word for it, but it doesn't look like it. Or what that indicates is he had so much to learn that he learned some very fundamental, easy things, low-hanging fruit, the first 8 times that he broke up with her. But he still has a lot to learn. But I don't know. I suspect that the core of his issues, and I can't tell, of course, because I'm only watching a reality TV show, but according to what we're seeing, I wouldn't be surprised if I were close to the situation that I would conclude that he has learned some things for sure, but not the core of the matter, not the foundation for everything. Because just imagine saying that out loud, like, yeah, the 10, 11 times that I've broken up with her, I've learned something every single time. That's like saying the 11 times that I've jumped off the roof of a 3rd-story building and broke my legs every single time I've learned a lesson. Okay, but you're still doing it every single time. Like, so what lessons did you learn? Well, I learned lessons that if I sort of hang from the awning and drop, it hurts like slightly less than if I just leap off the 3-story building. Okay, great. I mean, that's a lesson, I mean, in quotes, but it's not the lesson.
You ready, babies?
Now, I want to be clear. The lesson that I think that he needs to learn is that he has issues that are normal, that he has attachment, abandonment, betrayal issues that are normal to a lot of people, and it distorts his way of thinking, and then he does things based on those distortions. It's not complicated. I think a lot of people might say that the lesson he needs to learn is that he's a horrible human being and that he should never date anybody. That's not the lesson that I think he needs to learn. It's more mundane, really. It's not really a complicated lesson. It's a hard lesson for all of us. All of us have that. All of us have distortions to some degree that we have to learn about and manage.
Our agreement is I will see you every other night. Even if it's just like me coming over and sleeping next to you, that's it. Mm-hmm. And so far, it's been working out really good. The way we're doing it right now kind of should have been the way it started.
Right.
And there's a temptation, I think, for the two of them to notice how they're not fighting as much and say, oh, we're on the right track. They've been here before. They've broken up 10, 11, 12 times. They're like, oh, we figured something out. I now can manage our conflict. I now know what to say. Well, yeah, because you've broken up and you're kind of on your best behavior, or your needs aren't intertwined as much as they will be in the future and were in the past. It's easy to avoid conflict when you're not emotionally depending on someone, But as dependence becomes more, at a higher level, which is normal when you develop a relationship, then there's more at stake, and then you're more triggered, and you're more upset. So there's a lulling into complacency, I think, or a tricky aspect of doing this style of relationship that will trick them into believing that they are learning something and that they are getting better. But now they're presumably still in couple therapy. I don't know. Hopefully that's helping.
I don't know what we are. Ed wants me to wear my ring. I do wear it, but I don't know if we're engaged. I don't know.
And then a lot of people will criticize Liz as being stupid. Or, literally people will say that. I don't know, whatever it is that people say, insulting things to Liz. And look, we all have a history of questionable long-term relationship choices. There's nothing stupid or wrong or quote-unquote immature with having a messy portion of one's spousal relationship situations. There's nothing shameful about having messy relationships, messy romantic relationships. She's trying, she's trying to meet her needs. She's trying to find the right one. She's trying to discover herself. She's trying to stick up for herself. She might be growing and developing. If I was to think about her, I think we have seen potential evidence that she is healing and growing. The fact that at the engagement party, when Ed had that tone of voice about did you have a relationship with her? Were you in a relationship with that lesbian? And Liz is like, what in the world is And I know where that question is coming from. I know the tone of voice. I know what's happening. We've been here before. This is his jealousy. He's not going to stop. There's no convincing him otherwise. I don't know what to do. I've been here before. I'm running away, essentially. She just went, "Ah," and just ran out. I think in the past, she might have tried to work it out with him and supplicated herself and been a doormat. But this time she's like, no, I'm not going to do it this time. This is your problem. You're the insecure one. And she bolted. Now, there's another way to deal with it, but I think we might have seen the interim stage where she's actually learning, I don't have to deal with his insecurities. It's not my fault. And when they were fighting later on at his place or their place, she held her ground pretty well. I think there could have been a worse version of it that happened, like the phone call, for example. There seemingly, who knows, I just have these 2 data points, but the infamous phone call where he was being verbally abusive to her on the phone because she drove a coworker home. She seemed to be more subservient on that phone call and more destroyed by him. And what we saw this season, it was hard for her, but she was pretty clear and upset and just like, this is your issue. These are about your insecurities. It was affecting her, but so we might be seeing a progression for her in this way, and that might actually be contributing to the breakup because he hasn't grown a commensurate amount to be able to handle that differentiation from her. All right, well, that is it for that episode. If you want to become a patron of the podcast, that's the best way you can support what we're doing here. Our deep dives, in which I'll go deep into different topics clinically. Basically, they're like trainings. They're that level of depth. If you're a clinician in particular, I could imagine it being helpful. And those are available to patrons if you're interested, only if you want to. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.